We doing? Hey, I'm on. All right. I said a few words before you heard, it was going. I was saying, what's that stand for? Because that's what, the obvious is something new and different. I'm going to keep you in suspense because first I want to share some announcements. So if I haven't met you before, I want to say this. Welcome. We're glad that you chose to join us here at Westtown. And you are here in an exciting season because we are finishing a series that we've been going through for the last couple of months. And we're starting a new series next week where we're going to be focusing on Advent, on Christmas. And so we'll talk more about that coming up. But we want, in all aspects and all ways, to try to help you take your next step. As a church that believes in believing, in belonging to a church, in becoming, which means growing in faith and discipleship, and beyond, which means going beyond and doing things in mission, we hope that you will join us, and we want you to take your next steps. And so I want to welcome everybody today, but particularly if you're joining us for the first time or haven't got connected, I want to encourage you to fill out this connection card. It's in the seat in front of you. And when you're done, take it to the information center at the end of service. We've got a gift for you. And we also want to answer any questions we can, help you in your walk, pray with you, pray for you today, if that helps as well. Got a couple other announcements I want to share, and as I do, I'm going to call the ushers forward. They're going to collect the morning's tithes and offerings. What I will say is you can give in a number of different ways. You can give in the basket. There's also a box in the back you can give after, before service, and then many of you already do this, but you can give virtually as well. We are not asking for money. What we are doing is encouraging you to take steps forward in discipleship. We want more for you than we want from you. And so we're hoping that in the act of giving, like any other, it's an act of worship, an act where you can grow formatively and in your trust of what God is doing and in the way that He is calling you, your spouse, your family, whoever it might be, to give towards Him in all aspects, not just in finances, but in time, in your giftings, whatever it might be. So the two big announcements I have, one is next week is our first in a while Family Fifth Sunday. So we are really excited about this. Certainly, if you've been here before, you know this is an opportunity where we get to see some of the children participate in worship in this service in a different way. Some of them will help with ushering and greetings. Some of them have done things on the platform. But in all of it together, they get to participate in this. And the thing that I attempt to try to challenge us with as the teens and the adults in the room is this. We have the opportunity to reveal to them and to show them what it's like to worship together as a body. And so we get to be the example in this space just like any other. And so next week we'll have a service together where everybody will be in this space together. The second thing that goes along with that is oftentimes we have some kind of a meal or some kind of a time afterwards for fellowship. And so we encourage you to participate in that. After the service, we'll have a potluck. We'll all be in here together. The one big thing we're asking for you to do if you're going to participate in that is to register. Whether you're going to bring a dish or not, we want to make sure we have enough seats, and we want to make sure that we have enough food and just to see what we have. And so what we're encouraging everybody to do, if you're coming next week, is to get on the Church Center app and register for that meal. If you need help with that, stop by the information center. We'd love to help you with that this morning. But if you already know you're coming and you haven't yet registered, jump on right now while I'm giving these announcements. Hurry up and register. You can go through the app, as I said, or through a web browser as well if you'd like to. But it is a lot of fun. It's a time of fellowship. That little greeting time that we got to do is kind of a taste of it. So you get more time to be able to interact with people and just to kind of talk through things. And this season, while we get together, and as Tyler was just praying, sharing a pastoral prayer earlier, one of the things that he talked about was the fact that we're in the midst of these seasons coming up, Thanksgiving and Christmas. So this is a time to be able to share together in the joys and then also maybe walk together in some of the difficulties that take place around the holidays too. And so we invite you to join us for Family Fifth Sunday next week. The other big announcement is this. You remember a couple of weeks ago, we made the announcement. I was excited and almost surprised to make the announcement that we already reached our goal of raising $8,100 over and above our tithes and offerings for a church plant in Zambia, which is exciting and applaudable. So I will pause for a moment. I was blown away by just the obedience and really, in a lot of ways, within the context of stewardship, just the giving nature of this church. I haven't been here long enough to be able to see all the facets and all the different angles, but just to be able to see that was encouraging. But I also have heard many of you say, well, I want to continue to participate. And we're planning some trips in the future. They're already in the works, and some other updates. We're going to have some videos and that type of thing. But until Christmas Eve, up to Christmas Eve, which is when this project was supposed to go till, but we already met it, we've got two other opportunities. You'll note in your bulletin that if you want to continue to support Zambia in this specific way, with finances and with prayer, particularly with finances in this specific announcement, there's two ways to do it. Number one, you can give to a specific pastor that's already serving in his family. You can give 2 goats. And those goats obviously can be used in a number of different ways. For them, they'll be able to resource milk out of them, and then at the same time to have additional goats, so maybe meat in the future, and then sales, that kind of thing. And so it's an opportunity for them to have some financial support, some continued financial support as they minister, and so that'll be helpful. And if you would like to do that, the cost is $150 a pair, which is actually, if you buy goats in this country, that's a steal. So just so you know, that's a great opportunity to be able to help a specific family that is in ministry, serving in a church. And then the second one, there's one Wesleyan college outside of the United States, and it is actually in Zambia. And so we have the opportunity to be able to support a ministry student who's going to be studying and coming along in their studies, and opportunity to be able to minister within the church, maybe even the church that we plant, which is kind of a neat thing too. So if you would like to, you can support or you can sponsor a ministry student that's already participating in or going to be starting next year at the Wesleyan School, African Wesleyan University. You can do so by giving $1,000 there. So you can do that. You can give in either of those. I want to encourage you to do this, to prayerfully consider if God is calling you to give, you and your family to give, and if so, how might he be calling you to do that? And then, whatever he says, step forward in it. And so, that being said, many of you have already given towards the school, towards the church. So if you'd like to continue to give, or would you like to, if you haven't yet and you'd like to give, you can do so in one of those 2 ways. If you give virtually, you'll see there's a couple of notations there, or you can give in the box or in the offering next week, whatever you'd like to do. But we're excited about this. We're excited about what's already happening and the way this is going to have a generational impact both here and then also for those that will be ministered to and are ministering in Africa as well, over in Zambia. And so we encourage you to take part in that, particularly in prayer, which the cards are still available out at the Info Center, and then also financially at this point, as we kind of continue to unroll this or unveil this new ministry as God provides it for us. So I mentioned those 2 things. One more thing, just a bit of housekeeping I want to note, and that is that this Wednesday, we typically facilitate Wednesdays at Westtown on Wednesday evenings, which is a great night to have Wednesdays at Westtown, right? That was pause for laughter. So that being said, we will not be facilitating Wednesdays at Westtown this week. Many of our leaders, especially that lead groups, will be out of town or they're going to be hosting family, that kind of thing. And so we want to give you that opportunity, that space to be able to spend some time with family, or maybe on your trip, or just to rest, whatever that looks like. And so because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we will not be facilitating Wednesdays at Westtown this week, but we'll be right back at it the following week. And so excited about what God's doing. If you have additional questions about any of our announcements or anything coming up, feel free to contact our office, but we're certainly excited about how God's moving and what he's doing as well. Well, I mentioned this a moment ago. This is the last week of this series, and I'm going to unveil something. So you were wondering why I brought this music stand out, right? You're just chomping at the bit. Anybody? All right, thank you. Right here. So you guys, everybody else is right here. So this music stand actually has a few items on it. I'm going to turn it around here. And I've got a few specific items, and I'm going to put these items out here so you can see what they are. I think they'll be on the screen too. So yeah, okay, perfect. So there's one. Here's another item I'm going to put out. And this. And 4 and 5. Okay, 5 items. Now, if you look at these, certainly they have different sizes, different colors, different things. And you'll note that in a glance that you could probably point out and maybe even name what they are if you're close enough to be able to see, or you can make that out on the screen. But I'm going to ask for one volunteer to come forward because I want to ask some specific questions of an individual. And so I will just randomly ask for a volunteer. Seth, thank you. Come on up. Nothing has been rehearsed, but I did secure a volunteer earlier in the week. This is my son, Seth. He is my middle child, and he deserves an applause for this today. So Seth, I've got 5 items here. Perhaps you can identify what each of these items are or is. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to pick up the one that is actual U.S. currency. Which one of these 5 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is U.S. currency? And if you can choose it, hold on. I'm going to sweeten the pot. If you can choose it, you can have it, okay? Matter of fact, whatever item you choose, you can have. That sound good? All right. So, time out. Shoot. Okay, we got plenty of candy at home. All right. Don't let that sway you. Which item is U.S. currency? Very good. Is he right? Everybody, I should have said very good. Yeah, good job, Seth. So what's this right here? Monopoly money. What about this? A playing card. Yes, I should have had another mic for you. And this one? More Monopoly money. This one's 10, this one's 20. It's from different games. And then this one? Anybody like chocolate? Yeah, all right. Very good. Nice. Okay. You get the $1. Seth has a dentist appointment coming up, so I wanted to make sure that... So here's the deal. 5 items up here. And I will repeat his answers because, like I said, I didn't bring my mic up for him. What was the indicator that was the real U.S. currency? It looks like it. Okay, anything else? Has a president on it? He phoned a friend there, pulled the audience. All right, what about like color, size? Do those things matter? Okay, you know what it looks like, right? You know what U.S. currency looks like. You also know what it doesn't look like, but this is more important, right? When you looked at it, you could tell which one it was right out of the gate? Okay, well done. You know what, Seth? I'm going to give you the rest of these as well. Make sure those get back in the right games when you get home, if you would. That'd be great. So can we hear it for Seth one more time? So it is interesting to note that when we put these things together, or when I did, I should say, put these 5 things together, it didn't probably take long for Seth, and probably for the rest of you, to look at them and say, that one is the genuine article. That's the one where if you go to the store, first of all, they're going to probably ask for more, depending upon what you're buying. But when you go to the store, they're going to say, that one we'll take, that's legal tender. The rest of those, that's funny. And maybe the chocolate, they'll say thank you, but that's the end of it, right? That's the only one that will spend, so to speak. I don't know if you recognize this or know this or not, but in most cases, when someone is attempting to try to discern whether or not a bill is genuine versus a bill being counterfeit, there is very little study on the monopoly money. There's very little study on the counterfeit bill or the chocolate bar bill. Instead, the primary focus, the most important thing that is studied, the only thing, so to speak, that's studied for those who are attempting to try to detect whether something is counterfeit or genuine, is the genuine article. You might recognize spiritually where I'm headed with this. Today, we're looking specifically at another blind spot, and today we're going to look primarily at where our focus goes. We're going to read today from Matthew's Gospel about an interaction that Jesus has with his disciples and how he is calling them not to look at the counterfeit things around them, not to look at the storms perhaps that are going on or raging around them, but instead to focus primarily on the genuine article, on him. And so today we embrace the idea that there are going to be fears in our life. There's going to be anxiety. There's going to be things that are drawing us or pulling us away from His truth. And sometimes in the presence of those storms, we're going to look away from what matters most. We're going to focus on the wrong things. But what God is saying is, don't allow the blind spots or the things around you to become blind spots, but focus on me. Focus on Him. A blind spot we're putting God in a box and saying, God, you're not enough. You can't do enough. God, you're not powerful enough is one that we maybe have heard of before, maybe even experienced before or practiced before. But here's the reality. When we undervalue God's presence and power, we focus on the wrong thing. When we look specifically at the bad things or the storms in life and we forget about the one who can make all things new, the one who walks alongside us, in essence, we put God in a box and we focus on the wrong thing. We allow blind spots to take place. Sometimes when you're thinking about specifically in training and in bringing up maybe even children and maybe thinking about starting a family, you may have had experiences in life, good or bad, and oftentimes when you look at your own experiences, you're going to weigh those experiences, how you were raised, and you're going to say, I will do that or I will not do that. Right? Sometimes you think, I'm never going to tell my kid this, or I'm never going to do this because this happened to me and I don't want my kid to experience the same thing. And I tell you, oftentimes that can have more of a negative effect than just primarily saying, here are the things that are important as we focus towards helping our child learn and grow and know Jesus. And when we focus on pushing them and guiding them and leading them towards Christ, that's where we find success, not in avoiding the bad or avoiding the things that we shouldn't do. Sometimes when we just say, I'm going to try to navigate through this storm and do it myself, we create blind spots because we put the focus on self as opposed to on the one who leads us, on the one who guides us. If you got your scripture today, like I said, we're going to read from Matthew's gospel. This is Matthew's account of Jesus' ministry, what he did here on earth. And specifically speaking, he records many of the teachings that Jesus does. He records many of the interactions he has with individuals, and we've read about some of them over the course of this series. Today we're going to read about his teaching, but also the fact that Jesus is a teachable moment kind of guy. He's a God who says, I'm going to find you in your best and even in your worst, and I'm going to use that as an opportunity to be able to teach you, instruct you, bring truth and transformation into your life. And so he's at this place with the disciples where they're embracing probably one of the most popular and one of the greatest miracles that he ever did. They're taking all this time together where they're engaging with these individuals, which is 5,000 plus women and children, and they're there with no food, nothing to offer of sustenance, and all of a sudden, Jesus gives a command and he provides the food. He prays over it. They break bread. And he provides the food for everyone to eat and have their fill. Now, I'm a man of faith, and I hope that you can join me in this, but I'm just going to tell you right now, next week when we have our potluck, I'm not going to come up here and I'm not going to pray over a loaf of bread and expect it to be enough for everybody here. Now, maybe it will, and maybe we could do that, but we're going to prepare. We're going to have things together. We're going to do this in a way where we're providing on the forefront, we're providing the things that are necessary for what we're attempting to do. I can tell you, Jesus' ways, specifically in this account, are different. Jesus' embrace here is to focus on him and him alone, regardless of the needs of the things that we have. And so after he engaged with this crowd, after he fed them, after he had this opportunity to be able to teach and even allow the disciples, called them in to participate in what he was doing, he then sends them away. And we're going to pick up in verse 22. This is after the miracle of feeding of 5,000. And it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And so Jesus did this on his own, right? He sends the disciples away and he goes back to the crowd and he dismisses them. And after he dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. And later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. And so he spent this time in prayer, in quiet, in peace and quiet. He sees the boat that was a considerable distance away, that was filled with the disciples that he had just sent away. And shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And this is pretty nonchalant. Matthew just kind of records this. Like, okay, Jesus he doesn't have a boat. He doesn't really need one. He just kind of walks out. And he's out walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Now, I'm going to pause for just a minute, and the reason I want to do that is because of the importance of these words. There's some very core pieces right here that we need to hit, that we need to connect with. First of all, Jesus, he walked to the disciples. He went to embrace an opportunity to be in their presence. He saw them in their storm, and he went to them. They find themselves in a situation where, and I mentioned this in our pre-service discussion and prayer meeting, when we're talking about the things, the memories that we have that we can draw upon that are deeply embedded in us. Oftentimes it's because of something we felt deep, or some kind of anger we had, or bitterness that we walked through, or maybe even fear that we embraced. And the reality is this is an imprinted moment for the disciples. They were struck deeply as a result of the fear that they experienced. And then Jesus, in that moment, in that specific moment, it says, but Jesus immediately, he saw the fear that his disciples were walking through, and he said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." In a matter of words, he brought them to a place of peace. It says, "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." And Peter, for those of you who don't know this, is oftentimes thought of as being like the big mouth of the group, the first one to jump out there. He's the one that oftentimes has to take his foot out of his mouth because of what he said or what he's done. And so here he's the first one to challenge it. Well, if it is you, if that is you, well then why don't you give us a sign? Why don't you call me to come out with you? And Jesus says, "Come." And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Now, there's some things here that are key as well. First, he gets out of the boat. He has the courage to do that. But what happens? Adversity. And maybe you recognize this in times where you have stepped forward in faith, maybe at a moment of baptism, or a moment of saying a prayer, or a moment of having a conversation. What happens? Satan attempts to try to attack. He throws out a storm. He reminds you of something you've done in the past, or a fear, or whatever it might be, and he attempts to try to draw that to pull you away, to pull your focus away. And what happened here, which I commend Peter for, is he said, "Look, I see the storm. What do I need to do now? I need to go back to the source. I need to focus again on Jesus." And so he calls out, "Lord, save me." And immediately, once again, there's that word. Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" When they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Now, don't miss this. I mean, there's a great implication there, and this won't be in your notes. Maybe tuck this away. When Jesus got into the boat, when Jesus gets in your boat, there's a sense of peace that comes. It may not happen physically around you, but there's a peace that we can have when Jesus is the one that indwells within us, when that's our primary focus. And it says, "Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, 'Truly you are the Son of God.'" And so there's this transition of focus, this transition of saying, my primary focus isn't on the storm anymore, isn't on these things I'm fighting, but instead it's on this God who came to us, who engaged us, who brought forth the opportunity for us to experience peace in the midst of the storm. Church, a big thought for this sermon and for this passage is this, that Jesus meets us in the storm we do not choose. I don't know very many of us that choose a storm, but he meets us in the storm we do not choose to grow us in a faith we cannot produce. Think about those words for a moment. Jesus is the one who meets us in the storm that we walk through, the consequence of maybe an action we have, or the consequence of someone else's action, or maybe the consequence or the response of just living in a fallen and broken world. And he meets us in this place that we do not want to be, that we would never choose, maybe not even wish on our biggest enemy. And in those places is where he chooses to do his best work, to bring faith that we cannot earn, that we cannot do, that we cannot produce on our own. God says it's in those moments that you're going to grow the most. You're going to grow the deepest, because the dependence is the highest, and God's grace and his light shines the brightest. The storm you didn't choose. I want to read just a quick story. It says that a few years ago, a sailing instructor told the story of a young man learning to navigate open water. For weeks, the weather was ideal. Calm seas, predicted winds, bright skies, and the student grew confident, even proud, thinking that he was mastered sailing. One afternoon, without warning, a squall rolled in. The sky darkened and the wind snapped violently across the boat, and the waves rose higher than anything he had faced. He panicked. All the techniques that he had practiced in calm weather evaporated from his mind. He couldn't control the sail, couldn't steady the tiller, couldn't even catch his breath. He shouted to the instructor, "I'm not ready for this. I didn't sign up for this kind of storm." Have you ever said that before? I didn't sign up for this. The instructor shouted back over the wind, "No one chooses this kind of storm, but this is the only kind of storm that teaches you who you can really trust and who's really in control." Then, instead of grabbing the controls, the instructor stepped beside him, put his hands over the student's trembling hands, and said, "I'm not taking the storm away, but I am here, and I will go through it with you. We'll go through it together." Later, the student realized something profound. He didn't become a sailor in the calm. He became a sailor in the storm that he never wanted. Because the instructor stayed close and taught him what he could never learn, never produce, never create on his own. See, just like that student, we don't choose the storms in our lives. We don't choose that diagnosis or that disappointment or that betrayal or that loss or that sudden change. But in those storms that it's in those storms that Jesus steps in and provides for us the opportunity by laying his hands over ours, by putting his arm around us, by perhaps even carrying us at times and allowing us to experience a faith that he generates only in the moments of our brokenness, of our difficulty, of the walk that we have. And Jesus doesn't calm the storms in every case. You know, sometimes we pray, "God, heal, God, bring this, God, bring that." He doesn't always calm the storms. You know what he does? He walks alongside us in those storms. And because of his power, because of his goodness, because of his presence, we can experience something, his work, that we could never experience in the midst of the calm. So instead of wishing away the storms and wishing away the season, may we pull closer to the God of all creation who provides for us an opportunity to grow in the midst of a storm. If you're taking notes, we're going to hit 3 points, and we're going to walk through this passage once again, understanding this primary focus that God has for us. The first point is this, that Jesus prays on behalf of our struggle, seeing what we cannot. That is, in all aspects, a relief and an amen. What a relief it is to know that the God of all creation sees the things that we cannot see, but because he is good and because he's powerful, we can lay back into him, and in all ways we can experience peace in the midst of our storm. Verse 22 once again says, "Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd." It continues, "After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray, and later that night he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it." Jesus sends his disciples ahead. He withdraws to pray. He goes to this mountain place and he sees their struggle. He sees what is before them. He sees what is before us. And here, the core truth is that even when we feel like we're alone in the storm, Jesus is interceding for us to the Father. Jesus is watching. He's working behind the scenes. He's doing things specifically for our good, for our growth that we may never see. The parallel passage in Mark, as he records this same thing, in Mark chapter 6, verse 47-48 says, "Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake." In the middle of the lake. "And he was alone on the land." And verse 48 says, "He saw the disciples straining at the oars." What a visual picture that is. For a bunch of sailors, many of them grew up on the water. They knew the water. They knew the storms. They knew their craft. They knew the apparatus they were on, but they were still straining, even in a place where they should have been so comfortable. And Jesus sees them in that place, in their darkest place. He provides for them an opportunity to be able to experience His goodness because of the straining that they were involved. Have you ever felt like in life that you're straining at the oars? Maybe at work, you're straining at school, straining at the oars. Maybe in your home, in a relationship, or maybe with a friend or an acquaintance, you're straining at the oars. Or maybe looking at the climate of the world, you're straining at the oars. You know what this reminds me of? Kind of like a visual picture of looking, maybe on a movie or a TV show. You sometimes see like that zoom out where there's a person sitting here and you kind of see that zoom out, somebody's watching them. That's what I picture here is we're straining at the oars and Jesus is right there on our behalf, praying and keeping us and providing opportunity in those moments, not outside of his understanding or his power or his presence, but in those moments providing opportunity for us to experience him and to know him. But sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we almost ignore that. We forget that God is there. When we're straining at the oars, we think it's about me. It's all about what I can do, what I can accomplish. I've got a classmate that lives in Oklahoma, and he said that life is different in Oklahoma. He's lived in several different places, but life is different in Oklahoma because there's certain seasons of the year where you never turn off the Weather Channel. The area he lives in is one of the peak areas of Tornado Alley. And he said, you never turn off the Weather Channel because in a moment, a storm can come through, a tornado can rip through. He said, every house just about has some kind of a storm shelter. As a matter of fact, when they bought their house, he said that was one of the primary things, or the primary focus, that they had a storm shelter, and he wanted to be close enough to the house that him and his children could all get there in time. And so he recognizes life a little bit differently. And I think sometimes, in the course of life, we forget the fact that we have this opportunity, this special alert, this communication, this warning, so to speak, or not just warning, but this understanding that there is a presence, there's something, there's someone else that cares for us, that's here, that sees us in the midst of the storm that's coming, in the midst of the storm that's here, and the one that is gone. And God is the one who provides for us an opportunity to be able to experience and to know what's happening. Psalm chapter 121, verses 3 through 5 reads like this: He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. God hasn't fallen asleep. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at the right hand. Just say this to your neighbor. Say this to your neighbor. The Lord watches over you. I want you to say, no matter what you're going through, God sees you. That one had less. There wasn't as many people that did that one. It's too many words, I guess. But the truth is still there. Church, the truth is still there. No matter what you're walking through, God sees you. He is present. He loves you. He does not slumber or sleep. He watches over his people continually. And the implication is this: seek solitude with God before you face your turmoil. Here's the reality. See, Christ is creating a template for us. He's doing it for us. He's revealing to us, look, there are storms that are going to take place. So be in communication. Be in light of, be with God. You see, we need to build a rhythm of prayer now so that when storms come, we can meet them with a confidence rather than panic. We can meet them in light of and in the presence of a God as opposed to on our own trying to figure it out, straining at the oars. The passage continues, and the second point is this: that Jesus speaks before he solves, bringing courage from his presence. Jesus speaks before he solves. He comes into our life. He brings truth. He brings things through this growth process that we experience before we ever feel a relenting of the storm, or we think that the storm is over. Sometimes he brings something to us. He speaks before he solves, bringing courage in his presence. Verse 25 reveals us, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, he's speaking here, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. The first thing Jesus did was not calm the storm, calm the waves. The first thing he did wasn't come out and just kind of just wave his hands and everything was fixed. No, the first thing he did is he spoke to the disciples in the midst of the storm. He saw the storm they were in, and he came and he spoke to them. Isaiah chapter 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. He wanted them to experience his presence before anything else took place. He wanted to experience his goodness before he brought them out of the storm. Jesus' his presence is the antidote. It's the solution. It's the thing that makes all things new, especially in the context of fear, not the removal of circumstances. Psalm 46, 1-5 says, God is our refuge and strength, in ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. It may feel like it sometimes. It may feel like that's the world sometimes, but God is the one who provides us refuge and strength. And verse 3 says, though its waters roar and foam. I love that because it fits perfectly into an understanding of the story we're reading today. And the mountains quake with their surging. He is the refuge and strength in our storm. You see, God is the refuge in our times of trouble, even when the waters roar. I think about Family Fifth Sunday coming up next week, and I think about what it means to demonstrate true worship with children. And sometimes their understanding of worship, their understanding of hope, their understanding of truth comes from the physical representations of the Bible that they have, and oftentimes that's us. We live it out. We speak it. If you've got young children, or maybe you can think back on memories of young children, there are things that they are fearful of that we are not as adults. We've come to a place where we're not fearful of some of the things that they're, maybe one specific one that if you ask most kids, a lot of them are afraid of the dark. A lot of them are afraid of the dark, the unknown, what is out there. They can't see what's beyond them. And specifically speaking, when we talk specifically about what it means to go from a place of being fearful to a place of focus, oftentimes that comes from the presence of somebody who we know can overcome. If you have a child, a young child, a grandchild, or your own child, and you know they're scared of the dark, when they have to be in the dark, the power goes out, or maybe they're in a position or a place where there is no light, there's no possibility of light, the best thing you can do is go and slip your hand into theirs, right? That presence, that understanding of the presence of somebody that's there, that cares for them, somebody that's there that can bring them hope in the midst of the darkness, that can change everything. Church, that's what God does. It doesn't matter what you subscribe to or what you believe. God brings in His presence a strength beyond what we could ever experience in this world. He brings an opportunity for us to know Him. He doesn't necessarily change the environment, but He brings an opportunity for us to know Him in a way that we could never know or experience otherwise. And so the implication is this: listen for His voice before you look for His rescue. He may not come in and flip the light on, but He may put His hand in yours and say, I'm here with you. He may not calm the storm immediately, but He may speak out to you and say, I am here, do not be afraid. He may not fix that relationship immediately, but He may say, I am here and I want to be present with you and whoever it is that you're walking through this brokenness with. He may not sum up all the issues at school and give you all the grades that you need, but He will be there and walk alongside you as you study and as you attempt to try to do your best in the future. Maybe God is trying to teach you something in the storm that you would not learn if you were easily delivered from it. If you were to say, the storm is gone, the lights are on, everything's perfect now, maybe you wouldn't learn what it is that God wants you to learn in the midst of the storm. I previously pastored at another church, and I remember having one of my parishioners go into the hospital. He had a stroke. He went into the hospital, and I remember having a conversation with him on the phone, and we're talking, and I actually don't remember these words, but I said to him, upon his recollection, I said to him, what is God attempting to try to teach you in this time? And church, he went on, from that moment on, he went on to literally write a book talking about what God taught him in the midst of the storm. He went on to talk about and to share about the way that God moved and the way that God could only move if he were walking through that storm and he were focused on Him in the midst of it. Now, I don't wish that kind of physical affliction on anyone. I don't wish that on any of us, but sometimes we're quick to try to pray away those issues, to pray away and gain healing when God's saying, no, before we walk through that or as we walk through this storm, I want you to know this. I want you to experience more. I want you to experience something far greater. You see, it's in the moments of fear that we need to pause and acknowledge God's goodness. We need to pray. We need to breathe. We need to rehearse His promises instead of rehearsing our worries or our anxiety. Call upon God's goodness, His praise, His strength. The third point is this: Jesus grows our faith through the journey, not just miracles. Now, you remember I shared at the beginning, kind of setting this passage up, that these disciples had just come from a place of experiencing God's power through this miracle, right? He just out of thin air brought this small assortment of food and fed what amounts to probably around 20,000 total people. And in that moment, they experienced a great miracle of the God of all creation. And here specifically, in this moment where they're in the boat, they're struggling with the oars. They're walking through this storm. God says, I'm not done yet. I've got more I want you to experience, more I want you to know. Maybe in the midst of the mundane, or maybe in the midst of the storm, whatever it might be for you, wherever you're at today, God doesn't just teach us and instruct us and allow us to experience Him in the miracles. He does it in everyday life. But sometimes we miss it because we're focused on the storm. Sometimes we miss it because we're focused on whatever it is that's trying to pull out our energy or our attention, and instead God's saying, no, focus on me. I have more for you. Back to the primary passage in verse 28. This is after He tells them not to be afraid. Peter speaks up, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water. And Jesus in one word says, come. And Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. I'm going to practice this, right? So we'll say this is it. Let's say this is the water. There's not a toe in the water type situation here. It's all in or all out, right? You either gotta step out, or you're gonna either get washed away, or you're gonna be unhappy. I can tell you that, right? So he comes and he takes a step. You guys are like, how old is this guy? Can he do it or not? So he takes a step and he's out, and at that point there's no going back. He's in the water. And he has one decision to make at that point. Is he going to focus on the one who called him to himself, or is he going to allow the clouds and the wind and the waves to divert his attention to something else? Now, omitting the metaphor I just did, I'm going to come back on the platform. But here's the reality of what took place. Peter gets into the water. He goes all in, which I commend him for that. But his first action isn't to see God and to walk towards Him, to see Jesus and say, there's the light, I want to be with Him. His first action is to be distracted by the things going on around him. Can I tell you, distractions sometimes can be our worst enemy, I should say. Because they become something that just diverts us just a little bit off of what's most important right in front of us. Peter steps out in bold faith, but he sinks because of the distractions of the things that are around him. But, we've said this before, but God, right? But God intervenes, and immediately, I love that. Immediately, He steps in. Immediately, He provides an opportunity for Peter to experience His presence. Immediately, He brings deliverance and love. It says, immediately, Jesus reached out His hand and caught him. You of little faith, He said, why did you doubt? He reached out His hand. The God of all creation doesn't say, hey, when you get it all figured out and you get everything together, come see me. No, He says, I see you where you're at. And He pulls us to Himself. Church, I've said this plenty of times, and I still, in some ways, I find it almost unfathomable to think about the God of all creation would be willing to come into our world, humble Himself in a position of even dying on a cross for us. Not so that we can earn it or do anything to necessarily deserve it, but instead as the one true sacrifice. And then, even in the midst of us still being sinners, he says, no, I'm here for you. I see you in your imperfection, and I don't want to leave you there. I want you to know goodness. I want you to know a breaking of bondage. I want you to know reconciliation. I want you to know hope. I want you to know the peace that you can experience when you come into the presence of a God that loves you, who is all-powerful, and who is good. Faith comes not by staying in the boat, but by responding to God's goodness, by responding and stepping towards Jesus, even when the wind blows, even when we're in the storm. Hebrews chapter 12, 1 and 2 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Throw off the storms, throw off the distractions, and let us run with perseverance. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes where? Not on the clouds, not on the effects of the wind, not on the waves, but fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer, the perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Focus on him. You see, faith grows as we fix our eyes on Jesus, not on the distractions around us. I've taught a couple of children how to ride a bike. Any of you have ever taught someone how to ride a bike? There are different ways to do it. There are wrong ways to do it. I'm a genius at that. I know some of the wrong ways. But I also know there's some good ways too. And there's one specific thing that I learned almost too late. It was actually, I was on my our third child. I was trying to teach him how to ride his bike. And I learned this little thing that is so neat. Now, certainly there's the part where you're holding onto the back of the seat, right? And then you let go. Everybody knows that one. And then when your kid crashes, then they're mad at you forever. Anybody experience that? Yeah. So that one takes place too. But no, this one's a little different. This is where they start on one side and you stand on the other. And you say, just focus on me. Just focus on me. Don't focus on the mailbox or the crack in the road, or don't focus on that noise or this. Just focus on me and just ride it right here. Maybe you've seen this in another way, even when the child is younger and they're taking those first steps, right? Grandma, grandpa, you've been there before. You're sitting on the couch. Mom or dad has the baby and just kind of trying to hold him up there, give him a little bit of a nudge, give him a little bit of strength, and get that one step. Just focus right here. Don't look at the floor. Just focus right here. Take that step. I think sometimes we're babies. Sometimes we're on that bike and God's just saying, hey, just come right here. Don't focus on any of the other stuff. Don't allow it to cloud your hope. Don't allow it to steal your peace. Don't allow it to steal your joy. Just focus right here. And in a season that can be so important when we focus on what God has for us as opposed to all the other distractions, God is right there saying, hey, in this season of gratitude, focus right here. In this season of hope, peace, love, and joy, those are the three cores of the Advent series, right? Those things, focus right here. Church, as we embrace this series, this conclusion of this series of blind spots, I ask this question of process. Because anytime we read the Word, anytime we grow in faith together, God calls for an action. And so I ask this question, what is one step? What's one step that God is calling you to take today? What is one step in faith? Maybe it's a step of saying, I'm going to eliminate this distraction from my life. I'm just going to put it out. Or maybe it's one where you say, you know what? I'm just going to focus directly on Jesus in the midst of this continual nagging. Maybe for you today, it's just to say, God, I give you all of myself. I haven't done that. I've been trying to do it myself. Maybe today you're saying, you know what, I've been trying to do all the other things I can to try to fix this relationship, and I haven't said, God, I want to sit with you and hear your heart. The core of this last one, this implication is pretty simple. What do? Take one step this week. Take one step this week. We're not a church that believes that all we do in faith happens on Sunday morning. This is part of it, but we live a lifestyle of faith, which means that sometime this week, maybe throughout the entirety of the week, God is continuing to embrace us. And when you walk through perhaps a mini storm or a large one this week, what is the one step you can take towards the primary focus of Jesus? Take one step, maybe out of the boat this week. Take one step through the midst of the storm this week. Take one step, maybe in the midst of the calm. Maybe one step to reach out a hand to God and say, I can't do this on my own. You are the one that makes all things new. You are the one that provides hope and strength in the midst of the distractions of the storm. Identify a single act of obedience that requires faith. Having a conversation, giving generously to another, maybe forgiving someone who's wronged you, or serving in a new way that you've never done before, but in some way fix your eyes on Jesus. One step. I'm going to close here, closing out this series, but also closing out this sermon today. And as I do, I want to share this bottom line, and then I'm going to share kind of a summation of the opener illustration, but also how can it continue to apply. The bottom line is this. If you are taking notes, certainly this is the crux, the core. The bottom line is this. Faith is not the absence of storms. It is the decision to keep our eyes on Him as we walk through them. I've heard people say before, I'm going to become a believer, or I'm going to become a Christian, and everything will work out just fine. Well, I can tell you, eternally that is true. Eternally, if you're a follower of Jesus, when you pass from this life, everything will be more than fine. You'll be living in the presence of God, and in the presence of holiness. You'll be living with others who are worshiping, and it will be nothing but glory. But as it pertains to things here on earth, not everything's going to be fine all the time. In fact, because of the fact that you've taken steps forward in faith, the evil one will be on the prowl, attempting to try to discourage and distract and to tear you down and deceive you. And so there will be times, there will be storms that you walk through. But the decision is clear to continue to keep your eyes on Jesus. This is one of my least favorite, but most favorite passages at the same time. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Perhaps you know it. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Is that anybody's prayer this morning? I mean, I read this and I think, man, what a terrible thing, but at the same time, it's like, no, this is a frame, a change of perspective. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. What was that earlier? We read about the running the race with perseverance. We do so. We gain that perseverance through Him. In verse 4, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Church, trials grow perseverance. Storms are classrooms for faith. The bank teller and the counterfeiter. I'm going to close with this story. It says, a young man once started a new job at a bank. And on the first day, he expected to be shown hundreds of counterfeit bills so that he could learn how to spot them. Instead, his trainer handed him a stack of real money and told him to spend the entire week handling it, studying it, feeling its texture, noticing every detail about it. After several days, the young employee finally asked, when are you going to show me some fake bills? When are you going to show me the Monopoly money or the chocolate bar? The playing card, I don't know how that fit in there, but it was there. And his trainer smiled and said, I don't need to. When you know the real thing well enough and intensely, you'll recognize anything that isn't genuine the moment it touches your fingers. And sure enough, later that month, as he was sorting some cash, he paused on a single bill. Something's wrong with this one, he said. And he couldn't immediately explain how he knew it. It just felt wrong. It just appeared wrong. It was not the genuine article. And then he realized, as he brought it to his manager, that it was a counterfeit. In the same way, church, God calls us to focus primarily on Him. Study Him, know Him, embrace Him, pray with Him, get in relationship with Him, and everything else, the storms of life, the distractions, all of those things, you'll recognize the counterfeit nature of what Satan's attempting to try to do in your life. You see, in His presence, false teaching feels off. Temptations, they lose their appeal. God's voice becomes clearer, and the noise around you is silenced. God doesn't call us to become experts in all the counterfeit ways of the world. Instead, He calls us to be in an intimate relationship with Him, to be familiar with Him, to know the real thing and not to be fooled. And so, church, as you engage this week, perhaps you're going to be getting together with family or hosting family on Thanksgiving. Maybe you're going to spend some time, you got a couple days off of school or off of work, whatever it might look like for you. May this be a time where you can simply pour into, engage, get close with God. Focus on Him first and foremost. Allow Him to embrace you in the midst of the storm. Because the God the God of all creation, the God that we worship, the God that we know, does have those two elements that are most defining, which is that He is good, the giver of grace, the giver of hope, the giver of peace, and He's also all-powerful. He can relinquish the storm. He can bring peace in the midst of it. He brings faith in the midst of our walk, in the mundanes, in the good times and the bad. He's a God that loves you, that created you, that desires for you to know Him and to know goodness in a greater way than you ever imagined. Would you pray with me? Father, we come to you now recognizing the fact that there are blind spots in our lives. There are things that we deal with, things that we walk through on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, Father. And in those, God, when we walk alone, when we do it on our own, we can easily be deceived. But God, you desire for us to walk with you. May we call upon you when we're fearful or when we're living in darkness. May we hear your voice. May we know you. May we say yes to you. May we reach out a hand and ask, God, for you to give us your hope, your peace. God, we ask these things in your name. We pray that you go with us this week and beyond. May you reveal the blind spots, give us courage to embrace them and to step forward in faith with you. God, grow us in the storms. In your Son's precious and perfect and holy and provisional name that we pray. And all of us said together, amen. Let me share this passage as a commissioning verse for us today. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. Church, if you need more prayer today, if you want someone to pray over you, there are some at the cross that would love to pray with you today. But as you go, know this: the God of all creation loves you and will join you in the storm. Go with God. He'll go with you. God bless you. You're sent out.